1958 was a year of major upheaval in Buick's history. Total sales reached just over 240,000 units, a disappointing number compared to the previous year, when the brand still sold more than 400,000 cars. And looking back to 1955, Buick had hit its peak with 738,000 vehicles, holding the number 3 spot nationwide, even ahead of Plymouth. So what happened? What caused a once thriving brand to plummet in just 3 years? A large part of the answer lies in this very car, the 1958 Buick. A model created with high expectations, but ultimately seen as a misstep. Not because the engine was weak, not because the quality was poor, but because it looked far too unusual. Sales plunge, a sudden fall from grace. By 1955, Buick was riding high, selling 738,000 cars and holding strong as America's third best-selling brand, right behind Chevrolet and Ford. It was a symbol of upward mobility, of middle-class success. If you drove a Buick, you weren't just going somewhere, you'd already arrived. And even in 1957, things still looked solid. Sales held steady at over 400,000 units. But then came 1958. Sales didn't just slip, they collapsed. Only around 204,000 Buicks found homes that year. That's nearly a 50% drop in just 12 months. For a brand that once seemed unstoppable, it was a hard fall. Even the Buick Limited, the crown jewel of the lineup with a long wheelbase, rich interior, and a price tag that would equal $55,000 today, failed to attract buyers. It was meant to compete with Cadillac. Instead, it barely made a ripple. Meanwhile, over at Chrysler, Plymouth was roaring back with its new forward-look styling, sleek, sharp, and futuristic. And it worked. Plymouth surged past Buick to reclaim the number 3 spot on the sales charts. The message from American car buyers was loud and clear. The world was changing fast. And Buick, for all its legacy and reputation, was suddenly behind the curve. Styling under fire. Too much, too heavy, too late. If there was one thing that turned buyers away from the 1958 Buick, it was the styling. From nearly every angle, the car looked bloated. Thick, heavy, and doughy, as one critic put it. The body lines lacked tension. The proportions felt off. And then there was the chrome. Not just accents, but sheets of chrome, layered across the car like armor plating. The rear bumper? Massive, overbuilt, wrapped in chrome thick enough to catch your reflection. The side moldings, rocker panels, and wheel wells? All dressed in glinting metal. Even the taillights were boxed in with oversized chrome bezels, giving the rear a clunky, overdone look. One reviewer famously quipped that the car looked heavy enough to sink into the pavement. And when placed next to the sleek, forward-thinking designs from Chrysler, like the 1957-58 Plymouths with their sweeping fins, sculpted flanks, and airy rooflines, Buick's design felt like a step backward. That's not to say it was all bad. There were a few standout features that still earn nods today. The front grille, made of 160 chrome-plated squares, resembled a grid of oversized cufflinks. Gaudy, yes, but undeniably unique. The gun sight headlamps, perched atop the fenders, were a Buick signature. And inside, the drum-style speedometer offered a rolling, horizontal gauge that was more aircraft cockpit than automobile dash. But in the end, those bright spots were buried under a mountain of excess. The message was clear. Buick had tried too hard to impress, and in doing so, it forgot what good design was supposed to feel like. Harley Earl, the visionary who went too far. By 1958, Harley Earl was nearing the end of his legendary career at General Motors. He had shaped American car design for decades, introducing tail fins, chrome flare, and the very idea of the dream car. but as his retirement approached, it seemed his final act would be the most controversial of all. When Earl walked into the Buick styling studio and saw the early 1958 designs, he wasn't impressed. To him, they looked too tame, too restrained. So he gave the team a bold, unmistakable directive. Add more chrome, more scoops, more flash. He demanded sweep spears, Dagmars, bubble domes, rocker moldings, portholes, chrome wheels, virtually every decorative element they could think of. At first, the design team thought he was just brainstorming, throwing out ideas to be refined later, but he wasn't. "Do it all," he said. "I'll come back and we'll decide what to keep." And when he returned and saw the designs still looked too reserved, he pushed for even more excess. Stylist Hank Haga later recalled, "We thought he was joking, but he was dead serious, and the car came out exactly like that." The result? A car overloaded with ornaments, weighed down by its own ambition. Instead of leading the industry forward one last time, Buick became a rolling symbol of design gone too far. A farewell note from a design legend, one that hit all the wrong notes. Interior excellence, where Buick got it right. If the 1958 Buick's exterior was a case of overindulgence, its interior told a very different story. Step inside, and you'd find a cabin that was surprisingly refined, especially in the top-of-the-line Buick Limited. The seats were thickly padded and plush, featuring double-layered cushioning, detailed button tufting, and chrome-trimmed piping that gave every surface a sense of richness. Door panels shimmered with bright work, and the dashboard, wide, sweeping, and full of detail, looked like it was pulled straight from a jet-age cockpit. This wasn't just a car interior. It was an experience. For 1958, Buick packed in features that were truly advanced for their time. An Autronic eye that automatically dimmed the high beams when oncoming traffic approached. A clever foot-operated radio with two pedals on the floor, one to change stations, one to toggle the lights. A drum-style speedometer that scrolled sideways like a tape reel, surrounded by full analog gauges for coolant temperature, oil pressure, amps, and fuel. And an HVAC control panel that was both futuristic in design and refreshingly easy to use. In an era where many car interiors were still basic and boxy, the 1958 Buick's cabin stood out. Elegant, high-tech, and thoughtfully executed. If only the outside had shown the same restraint and sophistication, this car's legacy might have played out very differently. The Nailhead 5.8, power, durability, and pure Buick soul. Beneath all the chrome and controversy, the 1958 Buick still packed something genuinely impressive under the hood, the Nailhead V8. This was the second-generation version of Buick's signature engine, a 364 cubic inch powerhouse known for its high torque and rugged reliability. Depending on the model, it produced between 250 and 300 horsepower. The base version ran a 9.5 to 1 compression ratio, delivering smooth, dependable performance. Higher-end trims, like the Roadmaster and Limited, bumped it up to 10 to 1, giving the car an extra push off the line and more muscle in the mid-range. But Buick didn't just talk numbers. They branded the engine the B20,000, a nod to a clever marketing claim. Each piston generates 12,000 pounds of thrust during combustion. It was aviation-inspired hyperbole, sure, but it painted a picture. This wasn't just a V8, it was a jet engine on wheels. Or so they wanted you to believe. In truth, the Nailhead earned its reputation honestly. It was simple, overbuilt, and could take a beating, qualities that made it a favorite among hot rodders and custom builders in the years that followed. The engine family would stay in production until 1966, growing in displacement, but never losing its unmistakable identity. Love or hate the car's styling, there was no questioning the heart that powered it. Dynaflow flight pitch, too smooth for its own good. Pairing Buick's powerful nailhead V8 was one of the most ambitious transmissions of its time, the flight-pitch Dynaflow. Unlike conventional automatics that shifted between 2 or 3 fixed stator positions, this system used a continuously variable stator, offering dozens of transition points for an ultra-smooth driving feel. The result? No noticeable gear shifts, just seamless, uninterrupted power delivery from a standstill to highway speeds. It was like gliding on a cushion of air, refined, elegant, and unmistakably Buick. But behind the wheel, what felt magical often turned into a mechanic's nightmare. The system was incredibly complex, with a delicate balancing act of hydraulics, valves, and vanes. When it worked, it was beautiful. But when it didn't, which was often, it was a headache to diagnose and expensive to repair. Even Buick's own chief engineer admitted, "It almost broke us." And by 1960, the flight-pitch Dynaflow was quietly retired, replaced with a simpler, more conventional unit. In the end, it was a classic case of engineering ahead of its time, a bold idea that delivered grace on the road, but couldn't survive in the real world of dealerships, garages, and everyday drivers. AirPoise, a bold suspension that couldn't stay afloat. In keeping with its futuristic ambitions, Buick equipped the 1958 models with one of the most advanced suspension systems ever attempted, AirPoise. Instead of traditional coil springs, the car rode on rubber air bladders, inflated to maintain a consistent ride height, no matter how many passengers or how much luggage you carried. The goal was simple: smooth out the ride, keep the car level, front to back, deliver a luxury experience that felt effortless and modern. And when it worked, it delivered just that. Buick's signature floating-on-air feel elevated even further. But the system had a flaw. It leaked. Over time, the rubber bags would lose pressure. The car would sag, shift weight unevenly, and feel unstable. In some cases, it would drop so low it looked like the tires were about to disappear into the wheel wells. Dealers struggled to explain it. Owners got frustrated. Mechanics hated working on it. By 1959, Buick gave up, limiting the system to just the rear axle. And after that, AirPoise was gone entirely. It was a bold idea that sounded perfect on paper. But like the flight-pitch transmission, it proved that sometimes the future just isn't ready yet. Clay models, what didn't make it, was even stranger. As wild as the production 1958 Buick looked, the designs that didn't make it to the showroom were somehow even more bizarre. Photos from GM's design studio reveal a series of clay mock-ups that feel more like concept art from a sci-fi movie than real-world automobiles. One prototype featured a nose shaped like a giant turbine, with exaggerated pointy contours that looked ready to lift off a runway. The headlights, mounted high, bulbous, and bug-eyed, jutting out like insect antennae from swollen fenders. The rear? Even stranger, exhaust pipes tucked into the bumper, fake vents, and massive chrome blobs that warped the lines of the car instead of enhancing them. The whole thing felt off-kilter and overcooked, like a design trying to impress, but not knowing when to stop. As the narrator aptly put it, if GM had actually built this version, it might have been worse than the one they did release. It's a glimpse into how close Buick came to crossing the line from overstyled to outright surreal. And it proves something that's easy to forget. Sometimes the only thing worse than a bad design is the one that almost happened. The 1958 Buick wasn't a bad car. Mechanically, it had a strong engine, a luxurious interior, and cutting-edge technology, some of it even ahead of its time. But it also stands as a clear example of one of the classic missteps in American automotive history, when beauty is measured by the number of details, when design stops serving the customer and starts serving the ego behind the drawing board. In a year as turbulent as 1958, with a struggling economy, shifting tastes, and competitors like Chrysler surging forward, Buick chose to go in the opposite direction, and the price it paid was the position of an entire brand. But what about you? Have you ever seen, or maybe even driven, a 1958 Buick? What do you think makes this car memorable, for better or worse? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because it's your stories that keep cars like this alive in our collective memory. If you found this video interesting or worth remembering, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, where we continue exploring the glorious and sometimes regrettable machines from America's golden age of motoring. We'll see you in the next video.